Welcome everybody to the Gary Neville podcast. Beautiful evening in Liverpool and a very, very watchable game between the top two here. Liverpool led 2-0, Arsenal got it back to 2-2, which, Gary, given the week they've had, is a pretty darn good effort.
Oh, it was really good. I mean, I actually said to you before the game that I've had those weeks where the season's not quite over. You may have been out of the league and lost the league and you go out of the Champions League. But anytime you go out of the Champions League, whether you're going for the league or not, it's just a real challenge. Just the impact of that, particularly when you feel like you might have a chance of winning it. It happened to us many times. And, you know, going into the game, I said that Mikel Arteta will have had a big job in this last few days picking those players up and himself up. Just the emotion of that event, which it is a Champions League semi-final. They didn't quite get there. Paris Saint-Germain get through, and you know it will have taken a toll on them. So I think to come back in the second half like they have was a big moment. It felt like they were just done in the first half. There were signs in that first 5-10 minutes you just couldn't get the legs going. And sometimes it's a warm day. You're away from home at Anfield, one of the most challenging places. Liverpool sharp, making lots of runs forward, and just maybe on the ball they were okay. Arsenal maybe definitely lacking bite up top in the first half, but they certainly looked a little bit leggy getting back. You know, you think about the Robertson sharpness and the alertness on the second goal, just not quite getting back. Saka, Ødegaard, and I think it was Saliba not getting across. Little things that they wouldn't ordinarily do. So, yeah, it was a big response, and I don't know how that happened really. So, real credit to Mikel Arteta, because they'll go home tonight, I think now, not joyous, but they'll go home tonight with a little bit of pride and a little bit of feeling that, yeah, okay, let's get ready for next weekend, which is a big game against Newcastle, and it'll give them a little bit of a boost.
What have you made of the narrative around Mikel Arteta since the PSG game in the week? There have been some prepared almost to ridicule him, which seems crazy. The extent to which falling just short is so brutally considered by some to be failure, and his reaction to that, the words he's had to say in press conferences and so on.
He's the manager of a huge football club, and there's consequence when you get knocked out of a Champions League game late on, and there's a consequence when you're not in a league title. There will have been ridicule back in the day against Chelsea's Mourinho teams when they didn't get through to the Champions League final, or our Manchester United teams. It's just what you have to expect, and I think that he made some emotional statements and comments after the game, like we were the best team in the competition, which I'm sort of going to ignore and probably accept that when a manager is feeling such deep disappointment that he doesn't quite come out with maybe the right statement and the right assessment of things. He doubled down on it again on Friday, and probably has to, which I don't blame him for either. I played under a manager that doubled down on his statements as well. But they weren't the best team in the competition. I think the other three semi-finalists were all better than Arsenal, but that's not really a criticism, because I think Arsenal are a team that maybe are knocking at the door, and you know, we knocked at the door 5, 6, 7 times before we finally got there. And I think that's what Arsenal's owners, I think it's what Arsenal's fans believe, that they've got a manager who's on a journey, who's progressing, who's getting nearer. And he did make some statements that you thought, not quite sure that's correct, not sure that's the accurate reflection of the current moment, but then being knocked out of a competition like that in a way in which he will feel, and not being involved in a title race, will bring him huge disappointment and an emotional reaction, and we just have to put it down to that. I think I was happy on Friday when he did say that they've gone backwards in the league this season. I mean, it's plainly obvious, but there was some, I think, that were hiding behind the injuries, hiding behind the refereeing decisions. I think you just have to admit, when you've been 13, 14 points in the last 2 seasons ahead of where you currently are today, that you've got to, you know, look in the mirror, and the autopsy's got to begin, and it's got to begin at home. You know, you've got to say, what are we going to do next season to change that? You know, I had a lot of confidence in Arsenal this season, but they have left themselves woefully short up top. You know, seeing Mourinho up front in the game on Wednesday night, you know, it was inadequate later on in the game when they needed those goals to reply. And obviously they have Havertz, they have Jesus. I'm not quite sure you ever saw Jesus as being the answer anyway. But they've only signed one centre-forward in 7 years at the club, and I know people will keep saying, well, where are they? But in 7 years, you've got to be able to find more than one, and Arsenal have been pretty smart with recruitment. So, yeah, I think they've left themselves short in that department. Maybe they thought Raheem Sterling could be the person to step up and fill that gap as a third striker. Other clubs have players. We've seen Luis Diaz today play up top. He's not necessarily a centre-forward, but Salah, Diaz, Gakpo can all play through the middle. I actually think in the last half of this game, Martinelli showed he actually could be a real dangerous centre-forward with his runs in behind, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But I think it's been an emotional week for Arsenal. And I think they've just got to look at what they now need for next season to ensure that they don't end up in the same position again. And I said before the game, and it was a compliment, because we've been, I suppose, we've come to a point in football where there's no patience. Everything's very immediate. So to actually be in a good position like Mikel Arteta is, with the belief of his owners, the belief of his fans, and actually the belief of the wider media and football community that he should continue to do this job, having not won a trophy in 5 years, is quite unique. And I think that's because people can see what he's actually building at Arsenal, and it is a patient project. But he will need to come and win a trophy. He will need to win a league title, and I thought that season would be now. I was expecting City to drop off last season, to be honest with you, and they kept going for one last season, and before they had to obviously transition that team, just thought they would fall away, and Arsenal nearly got there. But I thought this season would be theirs, but Liverpool have been far more consistent and reliable, and that's disappointing and will be really disappointing and hard to take for Mikel Arteta.
So if we believe that Arsenal's number one thing, repair, is to get a top-class striker, how do you read the market this summer? Because there are only so many strikers in the world who are good enough to improve Arsenal or Chelsea or Liverpool or any one of the other, Manchester United, any one of those clubs that want them. And they can't all have whoever this magical person is.
No, we look at the obvious, don't we? Everyone mentions Isak, or they mention Gyökeres. But you see Paris Saint-Germain play without an obvious striker in their team. You know, Dembele's played up top for them, and you watch Liverpool today play with Luis Diaz. We've seen City over the years with that, you know, when Haaland's not playing, play without an obvious striker. Sometimes seen players up there that you think, well, how are they doing it? But, you know, Mikel Arteta's got to find a way. I think it's bloody hard work playing football without a centre forward. I mean, I've said this many, many times in 13 years at Sky. The goalkeeper, I think, is the most difficult position on the pitch. Number 2 is centre forward, because I think if your centre forward and your goalkeeper play well, you've still got a great chance of winning a football match, no matter what happens in between that. And to not have a recognised striker in the squad. You know, Havertz is half a striker, Jesus is half a striker. They can play there, but they do need one or two other forwards that can really be people who can sort of play that line and lead that line. I actually thought, like you say today, Trossard did okay. You know, Martinelli did well in the second half, but they're makeshift in that position, and you can get away with it maybe for a few games. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a 25-30 goal striker, by the way. You know, it's not going to be Olivier Giroud, but it needs someone up there who can play the position, who knows how to bring other people into play, who can sort of link with Ødegaard, who can make those sort of connections with the wide players. And they do need another forward as well, so they need 2 forwards. One's got to be more of a central strike, and one's maybe one that can come from wide but be a goal threat. And then I think they do need that midfield player, which it looks like they've targeted Zubimendi. So, no, Arsenal aren't in a bad position, but this is a drop-off. This is a season whereby they should have been there. They should have planned for being there. And, yeah, they've got to get that right this summer. You know, it's right that Mikel Arteta is believed in, that he's, you know, given further sort of, if you like, funds to develop. And I think there's another thing at play here, not necessarily with Arsenal, but I think we're going to see more and more managers keep their jobs for delivering their revenue targets, which is Champions League football. Trophies are important, but getting Champions League football is critical now to these clubs. And we saw Arsenal before under Arsene Wenger for quite a long period without a trophy keep his job because he was delivering Champions League football. I think there is an element of that as well, that he's delivering a solid performance. But I think he is proud, Mikel Arteta. He will want a trophy to go with that solid performance that he's got. And he'll be hoping, the Arsenal fans will be hoping that's next season.
We've done a lot about Liverpool. They're the champions, they're the best team, but obviously they're evolving too. What did you make of them today?
I wouldn't assess Liverpool today. You know, just that edge has obviously gone from the game because they've done their job. It's an incredible achievement, and they're just waiting for 2 weeks' time where they can lift that trophy, and these Liverpool fans are waiting. One thing I did notice on the way in here to Liverpool, I don't know if you noticed it, all the flags all over the houses, so they're waiting for the ceremony really. And I think there's even an element of the fans coming to the game, they're enjoying it, but that little bit of bite that you get when you need points is just not there, and understandably so. So I think that's where Liverpool are currently at. The players are probably enjoying themselves during the week, training well and training hard. But just, yeah, when you take that 1 or 2% off a team because they basically don't need to I think for Liverpool it's a really good position to be in, because I think Arne Slot, I said during the game that the planning could begin now. Now, there's no doubt the planning behind the scenes would have started well before now by the people in the sort of sporting department. But to include your manager when you're going for a title is difficult because you want to keep him sort of focused. Now they can really get into the sort of planning 2 or 3 weeks before because they've done so well to win the title. And similarly for Arsenal, it's a bad thing that they've gone out of the Europe in midweek. It's not good at all that they're not involved in a title race. This should have been a meaningful game today here that we were watching. It wasn't really. But for Mikel Arteta, what it means is he can really focus. I bet he's going into those meetings with his sporting department now and asking for them almost immediately. I bet they're sitting down this week and saying, right, where are we going to get this right? We need to get over the line next season. What do we need? How are we going to do our business early? It looks like they've started that already. There's strong rumours coming out about Zubimendi. There's strong rumours about Gyökeres, the striker. So let's see. But if I was Arsenal now, I think I would look at this as a positive to be able to do our business early and get focused on what they need to do in terms of getting next season right. And the same for Liverpool.
Awkward one to ask you this because Liverpool fans don't want to be told what to think, how to react or whatever, but...
Well, according to Jamie Carragher, you can't tell Liverpool fans what to think.
And perhaps he's right. I just wonder, though, what you made of the reaction to Trent today, because there was actually a bit of a pantomime.
But what were you expecting? I mean, Peter, this isn't
about... I didn't know what to expect.
Yeah, no, I didn't know what to expect. I'm asking you because this is... It's not really you watch all the games and you obviously have assessed today coming. The big thing would be Trent Alexander-Arnold's not going to play. I think Arne Slot told us that. But how would the Liverpool fans react? I didn't know what to expect at all.
And Gary, I don't know about you, but even when I hear the boos, and there's no point pretending there weren't boos because there were.
Oh, there were, yeah.
There were audible boos. But even when I hear them, it's hard to establish whether they're just a loud minority or whether that's the mood.
Look, it's a proud city. A passion that runs through the city for looking after their own, for their own players, for their own fans, for their own people, and that feeling of disloyalty is what they're feeling. You know, how can you leave us? You're one of us. You belong here. We looked after you. We brought you up. We're a great club. We've won Champions Leagues. We've won Premier League titles. Why do you want to leave? And that's what they'll be thinking, and it brings out a level of emotion, disappointment and anger. And we've seen some of that in this stadium today. There were ripples of claps, but there was definitely boos, as you say, from a large contingent of Liverpool fans. And I wasn't sure what to expect. I don't really know what to say to it. I mean, I'm not a Liverpool fan. I'm not a Liverpool player. A little bit sad, maybe, that it's come to that, and that's the way it is. But also, I said before the game, it takes real courage and guts, to be fair. I know Liverpool fans won't think that, but I'm sure that the pressure that he's been put under locally to stay, you imagine the pressure that he's been put under by the club, and I mean in a good way, by the likes of Virgil van Dijk and Mo Salah and the other players saying, come on, sign with us, let's go on this journey again, let's build for another 4 or 5 years together. And he's withstood it, and he said, no, I'm going to go and play for Real Madrid. And it's the one club that does grab players from the top clubs in this country. And it's done it time and time again. So I think for that, you've got to say that he's going on a different path. He's chosen a different chapter in his life. I think it'll be really interesting to see. I always remember when, one of my best friends, David Beckham, left to go to Real Madrid, and I went over there watching him a couple of times. That stadium is immense. That club is off the scale. And he'll have to cope with that next season. This is a big club. Real Madrid is a giant when it comes to sort of pressure and sort of microscope. So, yeah, it'll be really interesting how he does there next season, and I think a lot of eyes will be on him with interest and intrigue. Conor Bradley had difficult moments in this game today, and he's got to sort of really knuckle down now and take that position. His name was sang by the Kop when Trent Alexander-Arnold came on. But, yeah, I didn't know what to expect before the game, and, he obviously got a little bit of a boo, but it is what it is. I mean, that fans, have the right to feel despondent and frustrated and disappointed, and that they voiced that today.
One other thing before we close, I think people would like to hear your excitement about the upcoming Europa League final.
It's not excitement.
I mean, what a game.
Yeah.
What a game that is.
Between 16th and 17th in the Premier League. I mean, from watching it today. Look, what an opportunity. What a game. A game with such jeopardy, such consequence for the winners and for the losers. A magnificent night awaits for the winner, and a horrible night awaits for the loser. And to be fair, I said it earlier on in the week, and I don't know if any other United fans are feeling the same. There is an excitement about a final. but there's also that sickly feeling of it's got to go right, and that's always been the same in football. You know what's at stake, but it feels more at stake just because of the fact it's an English team. You know, in 2008, I wasn't in the squad, in the matchday squad, but I travelled with the squad to Moscow when we beat Chelsea, and it was a game where you just thought, if Chelsea had beaten us that night, how bad would it have been? How sort of, you know, just losing against Chelsea, one of the competitors in your own league, and then, you know, the United lads, Tottenham lads will travel there in 10 days' time and to Bilbao with excitement, wanting to win, knowing they can get Champions League football at the end of what's been a horrible season for both of them in the Premier League, and grab some sort of type of victory from defeat. And that's how it would be for, I think, Ange Postecoglou and for Ruben Amorim. Ruben Amorim's quotes the day after the game, I think, were quite stark about, you know, the fact that, you know, every single weekend they seem to just let those United fans down. They've just switched off completely when it comes to the Premier League, and Tottenham have as well. And it's all eyes towards that final, so much at stake. Half anxious, half excited, half nervous,
And you've
half worried to
just
death.
talked about that Moscow final, yeah. That Moscow final that went to penalties, and John Terry's famous.
No.
I mean, a penalty shootout in Bilbao. I mean, it doesn't bear thinking about for either side, does it?
No, it doesn't, Peter. I'm sorry.
I'll let you drift away
No,
on that
just
thought.
it doesn't. No. Look, it's 10 days away. People might say, well, Gary, you played in finals, you played in FA Cup finals, and, you know, I didn't quite feel like this. But I do remember the couple of years where I missed a game or two and I missed a couple of finals, and I felt, you know, back then, that sickly feeling of the penalties in Moscow, and that horrible feeling of thinking, you know, in Barcelona when we lost that final, in Rome when we lost that final to Barcelona, that sickly feeling of being sort of there and watching, knowing the fans, 15, 20,000, 30,000 of them had travelled. Yeah, there's a lot at stake,
There is. That's upcoming, as you say, 10 days away.
Thank you.
We'll see you again next weekend.
Thanks, Peter.
Thanks, Gary.
Thank you.